All right, so next we're looking at solving simple trigonometric equation. This says graphical solution of sine x is equal to k. All right, so you're not seeing a graph, but all right, let's solve this. All right, so here we're told that sine of x is equal to k, where k is between -1 and +1. So k is the sine of the angle x, and the sine of an angle can only have a value between -1 and +1. Something I want to point out here that I probably should have pointed out earlier. I did say it, but the exact relevance of it might not sink in when I said it earlier. That the sine graph repeats itself every 360 degrees. The sine graph repeats itself every 360 degrees. So an angle is not just between 0 and 360 degrees. You can have angles between 360 degrees to 720 degrees. The sine graph repeats itself between those angles. All right, so let us say that k is positive. Let us say that k is positive. So if the sine of x is equal to k, it's an equation that we need to solve. The unknown here is x. We need to determine what the value of x is. Now, if I know the sine of an angle, to find what the angle is x, I need to use sine inverse. So x is equal to sine inverse of k. And let us say the answer for x is equal to sine inverse, the answer to sine inverse k in the first quadrant, let us say that is alpha. So remember, so my answer, k is positive. In the first quadrant, sine is positive. In the first quadrant, let us say my answer is alpha. But sine is also what? Positive in the second quadrant. So in the second quadrant, my answer is going to be pi, which is 180 degrees minus alpha. But remember that the sine wave repeats itself every what? 360 degrees. So since it repeats itself every 360 degrees, between 360 degrees and 270 degrees, there is going to be another first quadrant and another what? Second quadrant. So this would be my answer now between 360 degrees and 720 degrees. In the first quadrant, it would be 2 pi plus alpha. And then the third quadrant, that would be what? 3 pi minus alpha. In other words, I'm adding 2 pi to all my answers. The first answer is alpha. The second answer is what? 2 pi plus alpha. The answer in the second quadrant is pi minus alpha. The answer in the second quadrant between 360 degrees and 720 degrees, I'll just add 2 pi, which is 360 degrees. So it becomes 2 pi plus pi is 3 pi minus alpha. And then 4 pi plus alpha, then 5 pi minus alpha. So my general solution is x is equal to n it looks like n pi. So we have 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi, 5 pi, plus minus 1 to the power n, and then alpha. Now, what the minus 1, the plus minus 1 to the power n does is that it interchanges the sign of alpha. As you can see from this line here, the signs of alpha interchange. We have minus alpha, minus alpha, plus alpha. It interchanges. The minus 1 to the power n interchanges the sign of alpha. When n is odd, alpha is negative, and when n is even, alpha is positive. X is equal to n pi plus minus 1 raised to the power n alpha is the general solution of the trigonometric equation sine x is equal to k. All right, so that's the general solution. The general solution of sine x is equal to k is x is equal to n pi plus minus 1 to the n alpha. Of course, this could also be written in degrees. So the general solution could be 180 degrees n plus minus 1 to the n alpha. The general solution could be that as well. Because remember, pi is 180 degrees. The general solution could also be written in degrees. Let me do example 2. Example 2 says, find the general solution again. Example 2 says, find the general solution of sine x is equal to a half. So let's start out. We need the general solution, not just a solution. We need the general solution. Of course, there's an infinite solution. There's an infinite number of solutions to sine x is equal to a half. And so we can't list all the solutions. We can only list a general solution. So if I know the sine of an angle, to find the angle, I'm going to use sine inverse. So the angle x is sine inverse a half. In the first quadrant, sine inverse a half is pi by 3. So that is important. Let me not write it here. It's pi by 3. So the answer in the first quadrant is pi by, not pi by 3, pi by 6, because it's 30 degrees. Pi by 6, that's the answer in the first quadrant. Remember that the general solution for sine x, the general solution, is equal to k. The general solution is x is equal to n pi plus minus 1 to the n alpha. All right, where alpha essentially is that answer in the first quadrant. All right, so my general solution here is going to be x is equal to n pi plus minus 1 to the power n pi by 6. Now, from this, I could use the general solution to get every single possible answer for sine inverse of a half. I could use the general solution starting with when n is 0. So n is an element of the set of integers, or let's say positive integers. So I can start off with when n is 0, when n is 1, when n is 0, my answer is just pi by 6, which is 30 degrees, the answer in the first quadrant. When n is 1, it's pi minus pi by 6. When n is 2, it's 2 pi plus pi by 6. When n is 3, it's 3 pi minus pi by 6. So you'll notice that whenever n is odd, the sign of pi by 6 is negative, and whenever n is even, the sign of pi by 6 is positive. All right, so the general solution may be used to get any solution in the infinite number of solutions to the equation sine x is equal to a half. All right, so here should have been sine inverse, so just some basic corrections. All right, so there should be sine inverse a half. See if I can get that in. Probably said it but didn't write it. So this is sine inverse a half. And the answer in the first quadrant is pi by 6. And the answer is true for all values of n, where n is an integer, not just positive integers, where n is an integer. All right. So let's have a go at example 3. All right, example 3 and then example 4. Example 3 says, find the general solution of sine 2x is equal to 1 over root 2. So let's start off. Sine 2x is equal to 1 over the root of 2. So 2x being the angle, 2x would be equal to sine inverse 1 over root 2. And of course, the angle in the first quadrant, the reference angle, is pi by 4 or 45 degrees. So the general solution of sine is 2x would be equal to n pi plus minus 1 to the power n, then the reference angle, pi by 4. So if you're solving an equation, it's not 2x you want to find out what is x. So if I divide the entire equation by 2, I'm going to get x is equal to n pi by 2, n pi by 2 plus minus 1 to the power n pi by 8. If you divide a quarter by 2, pi by 4, sorry, by 2, you're going to get pi by 8. So the general solution for sine 2x is equal to 1 over root 2 is x is equal to n pi by 2 plus, oh, what an error. But we have time, we can just fix it. So it should be minus 1 to the power n pi by 8. All right, so that is the general solution. All right, so next we move on to example 4. Example 4 says, find the general solution of sine 3x minus pi by 6 is equal to root 3 over 2. If I'm given the sign of an angle and I want to find what the angle is, I must use sine inverse. So the angle is 3x minus pi by 6. And this is equal to sine inverse of root 3 over 2. And of course, the reference angle is pi by 6. Or, sorry, pi by 3 or 60 degrees. All right, so the general solution would be 3x minus pi by 6 is equal to n pi plus minus 1 to the n minus 1 to the n pi by 3. All right. Now I'm going to take stuff a little bit further. Remember I said to you that that the sign of pi by 3 is either going to be positive or negative, depending if n is odd or even. So I'm going to say what happens when n is equal to 2p. So essentially there, that is when n is even. When n is even, whenever you raise a negative number to an even power, it's going to come out positive. So when n is even, 3x minus pi by 6 is equal to n is 2p. So it's 2p pi plus pi by 3. Positive pi by 3, because when n is even, whenever you raise a negative number to an even power, it comes out positive. So 3x would be equal to 2p pi plus pi by 3 plus pi by 6. Negative pi by 6 on the left goes over to the right and become positive. So this is 3x is equal to 2p pi plus 3 pi by 6, which is pi by 2. This is pi by 2, because pi by 3 is 60 degrees. Pi by 6 is 30 degrees. 60 plus 30 is 90 degrees, and 90 degrees is pi by 2. Now, if I divide the entire equation by 3, I'm going to get x is equal to 2 p pi by 3 plus pi by 6. So that is when n is even. Let us see what happens when n is odd. So when n is equal to, let us say, 2p plus 1, where p is an integer. If p is an integer, 2p plus 1 is odd. If n is odd, the sign of pi by 3 is going to become out negative. So we're going to have 3x minus pi by 6 is equal to 2p plus 1 pi minus pi by 3. Minus pi by 3, because when n is odd, pi by 3 is going to come out negative. So 3x minus pi by 6, or sorry, let's just kill two birds with one stone. 3x would be equal to, distributive law first, 2p pi plus pi minus pi by 3 plus pi by 6. Negative pi by 6 on the left goes over to the right and become positive. Simplifying, I'm going to get 3x is equal to 2p pi. So this would be plus 6 pi by 6 minus 2 pi by 6 plus pi by 6. So that is what? 7 pi by 6 minus 2 pi by 6, that's 5 pi by 6. So 3x is equal to 2p pi plus 5 pi by 6. If I divide the entire equation now by 3, I'm going to get x is equal to 2p pi by 3 plus 5 pi by 18. And of course, pi by 18 is 10 degrees. So 5 pi by 18 would be 50 degrees.